All right, well, welcome to the 2023 budget deliberations, and looking forward to the next 3 days, or at least Thursday, Friday, and next Tuesday. And I also want to let council and our administration team know that last night the town of Innisfail won the Partner of the Year award at the Chamber of Commerce Awards Gala, so that was really nice, and relationship has come a long way, so thanks to everybody at the town here who I know works so hard and collaborates with the chamber all the time and helps, and we're very grateful for that. So we will get underway and look forward to the discussions and decision-making process.
Thanks, Mayor Barkley. Good morning, Council. Looking forward to the next few days working with you to see where you'd like to go for 2023. Let's move into the next slide, please. I must say before we get into it, I do have to step out probably around 10:30 for a couple hours. And that's where you can get all your decisions made, maybe. But certainly looking for the team to continue on that discussion. But I have a personal item I need to attend to. So just going into the budgets, just quickly a lead in. We talked a lot about strategic plan, how important that is. And the vision, mission are there for your consideration. I won't read them, but it does come into play moving into these bigger policy items, such as the budget. Values, same. Are we living our values? The values are built about a year ago. First part of council following the election. Again, we refer back to values as we conduct our core business, and then certainly go back to values if we have some struggle along the way, just making sure we're connected in. Strategic plan, as we know, and I do want to reference the 4 major priorities that you've established. Connected community that fosters a sense of belonging, a robust and adaptable economy, respect for environment, and provides strong leadership. Something I worked on last few days, and something I probably should have talked to you, Council, but also SLT. This is new to SLT too, just to kind of develop the budget objectives, and maybe into next year, let's develop the objectives where your focus areas, besides the targets, some metrics, but where are your objectives? And what I'm suggesting to you are these 4 objectives, but they can be adjusted or even removed, but they can be adjusted based on your deliberation and debate as you learn more of what administration is proposing to you. So budget objectives include to advance council's strategic priorities, to provide high quality municipal services valued by the residents, to maintain competitive property taxes, and to protect the organizational health. So I'm happy to introduce the administration's 2023 proposed budgets. I'll briefly introduce the budgets, and then we'll turn over to the Director of Corporate Services, Erica Vickers, and then on to the respective directors and managers accordingly to provide you the necessary information. As I lead into the budget, again, just looking at the 4 objectives, just focus areas. As mentioned to Council during the pre-budget planning sessions, the town's revenue sources include municipal taxation, user fees, grants, franchise fees, levies, and developer contributions. There are several factors that are influencing the budget at a higher level. These factors include Council's strategic plan, operational requirements, volatility of commodity prices in relation to energy and fuel, government's reduction of the MSI funding and the unknown LGFF funding allotments, and inflation and interest rate hikes. The 2023 budgets demonstrate reinvestment into the infrastructure and maintaining high quality service levels. Administration is proposing some service level adjustments within the current resource allocations and requires resource increases because of community growth and previous projects completion. The budget process is extensive, with the Corporate Services Department initiating the process typically around the end of the 2nd quarter of the year. Each department is required to work with the respective teams to evaluate risks and opportunities and confirm priorities following a rigorous operational and infrastructure analysis. The operational capital budgets are reflective of each department's resource requirements to effectively operate the departments and to achieve Council's strategic priorities. The budget includes a forecast of tax revenues and adjustment to utility rates as a requirement by the Utilities Commissions and for the town's operational and capital needs. Council will be challenged to make decisions regarding reserves and whether further depletion is justified, weighed against the need to invest in infrastructure replacement, or is it the appropriate time to make increases in the reserves to add to the town's financial stability and invest strategically at the appropriate time. As part of the pre-budget planning, Council set an initial budget increase target at 4%. Administration has not achieved that target of 4% increase, and the initial budget deliverable that you're going to hear today represent a 6.4 budget increase. We must be prudent and focus on the operating and capital costs. There is a continued need to focus on revenue generation through taxes, utility and user rates and fees, and further explore non-traditional revenue streams such as revenue generated through renewable energy, for example. In mentioning renewable energy and sustainability are demonstrating to be primary metrics for those companies looking at Innisfil as a viable investment location. Tax revenue is the town's primary revenue source used to pay for municipal services and operations. The town has had success with a relative short window to avoid annual tax increases. Although the strategy is useful in the short term, continued avoidance of marginal tax revenue increases could have future accumulative impacts. Following the conclusion of the budget and council is comfortable, there will be time spent to pull up council's highest priorities. That'll likely come at a future A&P meeting. As administration builds out the work plans, there will be efforts placed to ensure the organizational systems support the evolving community advancements. As I move to close my remarks, I want to thank the SLT and their supportive management team, of course, Kara, and their continued dedication to the organization and community and their willingness during the budget process to adjust their department priorities for the betterment of the organization. With that, Mayor Barker and Council, I'd like to put it over to Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Council. How's everyone today?
We are great. Can I just, may I just ask a question before we get started? Can we see Councillor Wing on the screen, or is that not possible? Oh, okay. I mean, she doesn't need to, okay. Is she? Yeah, you can turn it off, Councillor Wing. Sorry, I wasn't sure if we just couldn't see you, but one question. So I just want to let everybody know that you were with us, and we'll carry on. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, we'll start to go through the presentation, and as we go through the presentation, we'll go through the pages in the binder as well. And if you have any questions at any stage, just shout it out or stop and ask those questions. Okay. So this next slide was a picture that you also saw last year. This is from the Citizens Perspective Survey that we had completed in 2021. And this is just showing that as residents of Innisfil, what the most important issue facing your community is. So back in 2021, when this was completed, the economy was the first one at 19%. Crime, safety, and policing was at 15%, and then roads and infrastructure at 13%. Those were the top three. So just kind of remind everyone where the residents' priorities were as we go through the budget. Okay, so just a little bit to note on our town organizational structure. So the Office of the CAO, that's governance support, operation administration, systems development, plan execution. Then we have the Department of Corporate Services that covers finance, legislative services, HR, IT, and procurement. Operational services deals with utilities, public works, parks, and health and safety. Community services deals with planning and development, recreation, FCSS, sustainability, economic development, communications, and marketing. Then we have fire and protective services, and they do fire enforcement as well as emergency management. So throughout the budget, we do have very limited ways of where we can generate revenue. The big one being taxes, and we'll talk about that quite in depth when we go through. Some other areas are the franchise fees, user fees, sales of goods and services, grant funding, and offsite levies. So as we go through this budget, we are starting out with a deficit of $201,635. So as CAO Becker indicated, we were given a mandate of 4%, which is what was put in here. And in order to balance that budget out, we would need to find this 201,000, whether by doing an increase to taxes, cutting services, or where have you. So this budget does include 4% for COLA as well as merit for our staff, as well as a utility increase of approximately $3.50 per month. That's an average based on 10 cubic meters. Continue to have the MSI grant, $65,000. We currently allocate that to the Legion handy van contribution, as well as to the Historical Society contribution as well. As well as corporate carbon tax has been incorporated into the budget as the last couple of years. It has increased to $90,000 this year, and we'll go into that as to why. So the next two slides are from the Citizens Perspective Survey again, just where the town would like our investment in services. So just as indicated in the previous slide, they would like some heavy investment in economic development, with 56% of the people requesting more, as well as 55% more services or more investment into the RCMP, 47% in recreation facilities. So that's just the top three. And this is just a continuation of services that we offer and where the residents would like our investment. So we'll just take a look at our current staffing levels right now. So currently we have 62 full-time staff, 19 part-time staff, and 28 firefighters. There is 2 vacant positions currently in our budget, one that we're actively looking for right now in our Parks Department, as well as a vacancy in our Aquatic Center. We do also have included summer students in our budget. So Protective Services, last year they received a summer student for the first time. We believe it was quite successful and have included it again in this year. The Roads Department is requesting 4, which is similar to what they had last year. Parks is asking for 9, which is 4 more summer students than they had last year. Water and wastewater share a summer student. Cemetery receives 1, and then 1 for community services, which would be our skate park attendant. So salaries and benefits are typically one of the highest cost expenditures for a municipality. Typically, they're about 50%. We're a little bit lower than that. And salary budgeting is quite complex when you look at anniversary dates, grid movement, performance management, source deduction, staff turnover. And when we look at it, COLA is the inflation and merit is that other, right? We have done a COLA comparison with other municipalities, and we'll look at that later in the presentation. And just note that CPI is currently 6.9. Normally we try to get the October to October every year for budget, and that's what it's sitting at. It was 6.9 in September as well. So property taxes is one of the largest revenue sources for the town. Property taxes are a means to which municipalities generate revenue to fund services, infrastructure, and reserves. Property tax is the single largest revenue source for municipalities. Rule of thumb, it's about 60% of municipal revenues. Innisfil is only sitting at 48%. Property taxes are based on the fee-for-service model. So property taxes pay for services that have a clear public benefit, things like RCMP services, fire department services, snow clearing, road maintenance, things like that. And property taxes compensate for services where cost recovery is partial. So fire, recreation, transit, culture, family and community services. So in the first tab in your book under the general government, that's where most of these numbers are going to be. So this year, our property tax revenue is sitting at $8,382,401. That does include a 4% tax mill rate increase from last year. This also includes the special tax bylaw revenue of $10,275. That's for the 61st Avenue and 37th Street. Next year, when we do our tax bylaws, we will have to bring back a bylaw for each of those special taxes. ATCO Gas revenue has increased from $726,000 up to $787,000 for this year. We did bring it to council previously and elected to not increase this for this year, so it remained steady at 27%. Fortis franchise fee revenue only increased by about $6,000 this year. Went from $1,648,000 to $1,656,000. One of the options at the end of the day, we will talk about how we're going to fund this deficit, whether that's an increase further to taxes, a cut services, or potential increase in franchise fee revenue. So I did indicate the first 3 percentages, or because that's all we can do. We're sitting at 17% now. We can go up to a maximum of 20% for our franchise fees. So a 1% increase will generate 97,000, 2% 194, and 3% 292. So in this department, we also have a transfer to reserve of 210,275. If you'll see, the 10,275 is a direct transfer to reserve regarding the special tax bylaw revenue that we receive. That comes in every year and must go back to repay that project every year. And then a flat $200,000 that will be going into the facility reserve.
How did you determine that number?
The transfer to reserve?
Yeah.
So the 10,275 is because of the special
Yeah.
tax, and the 200,000 was because that's what we've been putting through this department for the last couple of years.
Okay, because we're working on a reserve policy, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's not ready yet, right?
It's not ready now, so we will be processing this budget as is, and then we'll be bringing the reserve policy to you later and likely combining some of those reserves out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. In just a slide or two, we will look over how we've built in some paying for debt into this year's budget as well. So if we do elect to increase more taxes, each percent we increase more will give us just over that $83,000 mark in revenue. So to generate $200,000, we're about 2.4, 2.3, 2.5 and around there, the percent to increase. We did see some slight overall assessment increases, 3.178 for residential and 0.938 for non-residential. Further in your book, we do have a full breakdown of all of our tax assessments where you do see the breakdown by code. So you can see that we actually received about a $26 million increase in residential. So that's where the brunt of our increase is coming from.
Could I just ask a question? So each percent of taxes is 83. Last year it was closer to 75, I think. Is most of that assessment, or how much of it is actual growth of new taxpayers?
Thank you, Mayor Barkley, through to Councillor Bates. So that is what it is now today. So that's based on the last few years of assessment increases, that now a 1% tax increase is now giving us 83,000 instead of 75,000.
But I'm sure it's somewhat evident here, but how much of that is new taxpayers versus assessment increase?
So I don't have that information currently
Like,
right
there's
now.
assessment increase on current taxpayers, right? That's
Yes,
because houses went up in value.
yes, houses did go up in value. So I can get that specific information, but we don't have the final assessment numbers.
Okay, no, I just thought if you had a feel for it, thank you.
Mayor Barkley, Councillor Bates, I think we can indicate some of the developments that we've had to generate. I think it's a mixture of both assessment changing, but also growth. And maybe look at Director Jenkins. I know we have the new Day building, and there's a few other larger developments that play into that increase.
Yeah, I think Day Dental's a good example. There's, a little bit of expansion at Manville, and then quite a few of the houses in Bella Vista would have just been in their first, that they've been completed, so now they're in there for the full year. Oh, and Freeman Insurance, yeah, that's the other one.
No, I recognize them, I see them. I'm just curious as to if you had a gut feel of half of it was new taxpayers and the other half was assessment increases, or is it 20/80, or so? That was the reason for my question. It's not critical. Thank you.
Your Worship, I don't want to ask any questions now. What I'm thinking is allow administration to go through everything, and then when do you want to see us ask those questions? Because we can go down a rabbit hole and eat up a day, and that's where.
You can ask questions whenever we
anytime?
want. Yeah,
Okay.
anytime, yeah, for sure.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so in this budget, we did build in some future debt capacity through tax increases. So if you look in this column, 2023, next year, we did do a 4% tax increase. From 24 to 27, we did a standard 2% tax increase across the board just for the town's purposes. And then if you look at the second line, a debt increase of 1.75 in years 24, 25, and 26. That increases the transfer to reserve in 24 by 145,000, then corresponding in 25 by 300,000, and then 2026 by 460,000. Combining that with the other transfers to the facility reserve that we already have included in the budget of $450,000, that increases our transfer to reserve by 2026 of $910,000. And in your budget binder, I did do an estimate kind of payment for the pool. Just rough numbers of 25 million. We would expect to fund roughly half of that. Based on the payment would be $902,000 a year. So by 2026, we would have a fully funded debt payment for the aquatic center with relatively somewhat minimal tax increases. So each year, we'll bring this forward for future years for approval, but at least this gives some thought about how we can look at doing that over the next couple of years. Was there any questions on that? No? Okay. Okay, so the next line, I just did want to put in the historic mill rates just so everyone can see it. So in 2019 and 2022 are the only increases that we've had since 2015. Okay, and in preparation for this budget, we did go through and reach out to multiple municipalities around the province just to look at what their projected tax increases were going to be. Now, most of these are not approved yet, but they are what their administrations will be presenting to council. So if you look, you can see that the town of Ponoka is at 4%. You do have a few sitting at 2%, like town of Rocky Mountain House, county of Newell. City of Fort Saskatchewan is doing 3%. Town of Olds is doing 3 to 5, but the tax increases across the province are going to be quite substantial, with Morinville doing 10% and Canmore proposing a 12.5% increase. So, okay. Okay, and so in our tax dollar, so just our municipal mill rate only, if it's what it's proposed at, an average $300,000 home will pay $2,100 in municipal taxes. So that's not including the school rate or the seniors tax. And that equates to about $175 a month. And we just want to kind of reference the services that people get for that $175 a month versus what some people spend in a month, right? So you're getting snow removal, fire and emergency services, playground maintenance, ball diamonds, weed control, road maintenance, library services, community events, policing, and so on, versus monthly cable or internet, fancy dinner for 2, right? So just to equate, the kind of services you're getting for those dollars is pretty good. Okay, so this is the carbon tax expense. So it is in the budget this year at $90,000. So the tax per gigajoule is itemized out. So in 2023, we will be paying $3.41 per gigajoule in carbon tax versus our stuff. So it's quite expensive and quite a hit on our budget, and it's just going to be going up and up and up. If you look in 2023, it's 92,000 or so, and by 2027, it will be 177. So it will be almost doubled in just 5 years.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Are we GST exempt on our carbon tax? Because the individual isn't. Is the town GST exempt?
Yeah, so Councillor Bates, so we're not exempt in a way, but every GST that we pay for, we do get a credit back from the government every quarter, so,
Thank you.
yes. Okay, so that was kind of general government in a nutshell. Would you like to go through the individual lines before we move on, just to see if anyone has any questions or anything like that, or?
Just a comment. Can we get a copy of this presentation?
Yeah,
Please.
I was going to ask if you guys would like it printed off, or if
Yeah.
you just would like it
Yeah,
emailed out.
please. Yeah, thank you, Eric.
Okay,
So, Director Vickers, what would, at the end of the day, a $300,000 home, school tax, all in, what would that equate to? It's 2,100 for just our municipal tax, but at the end of the day,
absolutely.
the money coming out of my jeans would be how much
Yeah.
approximately?
Mayor Barkley, through to Councilor Harrison, so in your binder, a few pages after that, in the general government tab, we do have some property tax comparisons on what it looks like at a 4% increase, a 5% increase, and a 6% increase. What the tax would be today at today's rate versus the increased rate, and also what the difference is and what they're gonna see as an increase.
And typical, Director Vickers, like the school tax is approximately a third of the
Yes, yes,
ballpark, parkish, so can add a third on,
yeah.
yeah.
So on a $332,000 budget, what they're paying in 2022 would be about roughly $31.29. And then with a 4% tax increase, they're looking at $32.18, which is a rough increase, about $89 a year. So we're in around that $7-8 a month increase.
And that includes the school tax?
That's everything inclusive, yeah.
All in, okay.
Yes.
Because that's what our constituents need
Yes.
to see.
And do we have any indication of school tax?
No, Mayor Barkley, we won't know until they pass the budget, which won't come until March of next year, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Mayor Barkley, I'd like to move on to council, so that would be the next tab in your binders as well. So this department primarily is the council's department, so this is where council's honorarium goes, as well as anything that council does, right? Any of the conferences that council goes to, or anything like that. So primarily advertising and promotions, this is where the Canada Day fireworks comes from. Also the community awards and birthday celebrations, so this would be when someone's having a 100th birthday party or they have a 60th wedding anniversary, this would come through here. Sponsorships, so this would be if you're sponsoring a hole in a golf tournament or something like that, that would come out of here. We did leave the school scholarships in it for this year as well. Registration fees, we did increase this year to $25,500. So in that is paid for your AUMA, your FCM conference, the EDA conference is in there, as well as some miscellaneous, like your Spring Leaders Caucus and things like that. But what we did add in there was like a council spending budget of $2,000 per council member, so for $14,000. And that would be up to you to spend on if you wanted to go to this conference, or if you wanted to go to this session, or if you wanted to get this training course in it, to give you guys a little bit more freedom to pursue your own interests potentially and things like that. So that's why that does see an increase there.
Yeah, I got a question about that. No? No, I'm like, well, you guys opened it up. We're going down the rabbit hole. So is that gonna be a policy itself that we set for $2,000 per year? I'm curious.
Mayor Barkley, Councilor, I said, it's really up to you. It's always good to have clarity of how you function with those types of activities. Maybe the policy is you require a council resolution, or it's just to use for PD purposes with certain guidelines, but it's certainly up to you if you want additional guidelines to these types of potential training and PD opportunities.
And the only reason why I'm asking is just for clarity, but I think at times it can be restrictive depending on what we want to take or what goals that we have as a council. That's why I'm asking right now. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, perfect. And we did have to increase registration, or sorry, travel and subsistence as well, just to offset the increase in registration fees, because there would likely be more. And that's it for council, for that department. Is there any questions? No? Okay. Okay, so let's move to general admission. So when you think about general admission, you think about primarily this office. So this deals with dealing with all the residents who come in, taking payments, business license, animal licenses gets run through this department. We do have a bit of sale and services for FOIP requests, things like that. We do have a small rental and lease that's part of this department, and that's our TELUS cell phone tower. So TELUS does have a cell phone tower in town, and they do pay us an annual lease fee to have it here. So in general admission, so this pays for all our general legal services. We have had to increase it this year to $40,000, primarily because we've been using our legal services a bit more the last few years, you know, to review our policies and review our bylaws and make sure that we're doing everything according. This department pays for our assessor services, so that's Wild Rose assessments. So they did come and do a presentation last year for council. Every year they do give us a preliminary assessment for budget purposes, which is just an estimate. And then in February, we get our final assessment services for 2023, just before, so we can pass our tax bylaw in about April. So audit fees also is paid for out of this department. So this year it's approximately $40,000. They actually are going to be starting their pre-audit on December 1st. And then they'll come in April or so for 2 or 3 days to finish the audit. So computer maintenance is in this department as well. So they pay for all of our emails, all of our computer maintenance through For Real IT Solutions. They pay for Diamond, our computer services, our financial software, sorry. It pays for Civic Web, so that not only is our software that we use for council meetings and agendas and minutes, as well as our complaint software as well. We do include Zoom in here as well, so we pay for Zoom for the whole department, as well as when we say council chambers, that's the maintenance of the council chambers stuff, so like the cameras and all the hardware stuff. One item that we had wanted to put in here and pulled out in a way to try and cut costs was DocuSign, which is about a $5,000 item, and we've bumped that now to next year to buy it just as a way to save some costs. So contracted services has increased to $75,000. So that primarily is our HR contract, but that also is our answering service this is our after hours answering service, so which the residents would call in and call in. We are going to be doing a review of that service for next year, so that could change the costs when we do budget next year, but our shredded also comes out of here as well. And that social procurement is an item that we'll potentially be taking out as a way to save costs, because there is a $5,000 item in there for social procurement for some training for next year and to help us work through our social procurement policy. So our general insurance has increased to $210,000 this year. Staff development and training is $21,000. That's primarily most of the staff in this office. One thing that's in this budget this year is a citizens perspective survey. So we did one in 21. We had discussed doing one every 2 years. That means 2023 would be time to get kind of that mid-year review, see where the residents are seeing it in your midterm but with a tight budget, that might be something that maybe could be pulled to make room. Okay, is there any one of these lines that anyone would like to go further in or ask more questions about?
I'm curious, Director Vickers, on the DocuSign, is that the tool like it mostly to be used internally and with suppliers, or was that something you were going to be using with residents and businesses?
Mayor Barkley, it would be both, right? It could even be business license
Yeah.
applications that we send out to someone because they're in Toronto, and it would just be easier for them to do that, right?
Do you think having that tool would, reduce staff time working on things like that, and I guess create more efficiency is what I'm trying to get at?
I mean, it could do that. I have not looked into the effectiveness of how that would reduce efficiencies or make efficiencies more. But theoretically, yes, it would cut down. It would cut down on red tape for people who are using it now. They don't have to print it out, sign it, rescan it, send it back to us, right? So.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Your worship, to Director Vickers, I use DocuSign every day. I'd keep it in there. It saves so much time and effort. You can send it to different groups who need to sign off on anything. Personally, $5,000 is worth it, and so that's just where I'm at. I know in my world, I use it probably 3-4 times a day. So that would be my recommendation.
Councillor Maceros?
Thank you, Mayor Barkley, through to Director Vickers. Yeah, I agree with that. We also use it, and I just think about all the photocopying and hard copies and filing, but my question is about the legal services and what accounted for the increase?
Mayor Barkley through Councillor Mazzaro. So there's been some increased HR-related legal services that we have had to pay for over the last few years. And just with a couple of the property issues that we've had lately as well, that has increased those costs quite significantly.
And then you see that continuing for the next several years?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Bates?
So just a general comment at this point, it's hard to drill into each line at this point, and I think what we have to keep it in mind, though, I don't think we've had to do it too much during budget that I've been here, where at the end of the day, when you're starting to look at that 6% or 4% or whatever, you go back to say, is there somewhere you can trim? And, this one is, what's up over 10%, correct, the total thing. And so we might have to go back and look at some of these later. I'm just pointing it out that I feel, I hear other communities, when we look at them, some of them spend weeks on these things, and so at some point we might have to go back and revisit some of these, is my point. Thank you.
Can I jump in? Yeah, I was just gonna, Your Worship. And I'm not gonna debate with Councillor Bates. I see us being pretty lean, very lean, and this is why I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole, but I look at this budget or the previous budget and look at and comparing our costs overall, we're pretty lean. I think that when I look at IT, those are critical. Insurance is critical. All these things in general administration, in my view, is let's not count paper clips, because I think we go down, this is where I'm gonna get on my soapbox a bit, is we go down a rabbit hole to count paper clips, and what people want is services at the end of the day across the province in our towns, and we have to have a balance. And I look at the MSI funding there, or whatever they call it now, the LGAA. I'm just gonna be upfront that's a huge decrease to communities across the province, and I think that when we come out of this, I think or the presentation or whatever we're gonna do to the community, we have to be very upfront with people as to what was the past, where we're going now, and I think people will understand that the goals that we have set forth in the 4 years, and that's how I'm looking at this. And that's why I said the rabbit hole. I deal with this stuff every day, and that's how I'm looking at it. So thanks for your efforts on this. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd just like to respond to that. I think it's too preliminary. I think we have to go back and look at this at some point, and not to, engage in a competition of terms, but if it's a $10,000 paperclip, then maybe we have to look at it. Because that $10,000 paperclip is, as we've just seen, is the taxes on 5 homes. So I don't see anything here I want to discuss now. I want to see the budget, and then I think there's some point where, when we're faced with that, what is it going to be? Is it going to be, and it may not even be on this page. Just trying to point it out. Thank you.
We'll move on. Okay, so the next department is the Police Services Department. So this is primarily our RCMP contract. This does have our fine revenue. So this fine revenue is strictly from our RCMP members writing tickets within the town. So that's sitting at $80,000, just like it was last year. The RCMP other revenue, that is our RCMP, the girls over there doing criminal record checks. Now, they have not hit that $30,000 mark yet since we've implemented it. However, we implemented it and then went right into COVID. So it really wasn't a service that was utilized quite very highly. So we're gonna leave it there and see after hopefully a good year of service what that would actually look like. And the grant funds, this is the police services grant that comes from the provincial government that we may or may not get every year, but we budget for it. Okay. So salaries increased just as normal, so that we do have 3 RCMP detachment clerks over there. And the RCMP contract has increased from $1,497,000 to $1,612,000. So that is an increase of $114,000 on this budget.
Director Vickers, do we have someplace in this binder reserved for retroactive pay? Did we do that last year, like RCMP? Because we haven't heard from anyone what is going on with that yet, so.
That's correct, Mayor Barkley. We haven't heard whether or not we're paying, we're not paying, the amount. So we haven't heard anything that it is not in this budget.
Okay. Do you recall
anywhere.
just how much that was of the?
So I've heard conflicting stories. It could be somewhere as low as 147,000 all the way up to 250,000, so.
Okay,
It is substantial though.
yeah, thank you, yeah.
Okay. If there's no other questions, so Gary's not here yet. Want to skip? Okay. Kara, if you'd like to skip down to the helipad one.
Just council, we're expecting Manager Lee to come in to speak to the fire, so he's slated to come in around 10. Okay, yes, thank you, Mayor Barkley. So we'll just skip ahead to the helipad sheet. So the helipad sheet does look a bit more than it has in the past couple of years. So our new helipad is now fully operational. And with that includes some increased cost expenditures. I know we did budget for some of these increases in 2022, but being that it's only just open now we might see some of these. So the costs include the daily inspection of the helipad. So we do have to pay for one of our staff to go every day down to the helipad and do an inspection. We do pay for staff training as well, and miscellaneous maintenance. Hopefully should be a little low this year, but it still could be, as well as snow removal from the helipad is quite extensive as well.
So, Director Vickers, so that That's all included in the salaries, the snow removal, the inspections and whatever needs to be done there, that's that,
Yes.
excuse me, that $40,000, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Is that New Mexico or Innisfail? I don't know. No, I'm just teasing you.
Might look like ours.
Trying to lighten the load or
Yeah.
lighten the mood here.
I'm not too sure where that is, actually.
Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
meet the requirements
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah,
It's on somebody's backyard.
that's right. Okay, Kara, would you move 2 slides down to health and safety? Okay, so we'll just skip ahead to health and safety. So this is primarily our health and safety coordinator with a little bit of salaries included from support staff in here as well. So staff development and training has decreased drastically this year. So he now tracks what he needs each year. So it's kind of like a wave, right? So 1 year will be up because we have to pay for more training this year. Like, for example, all of our first aids expiring next year, let's say. So now we have to increase for first aid and we decrease it next year. So this year, he's covering hearing tests, WMIS costs, first aid, basic life support, safety officer training, supervisor role training, and flagger training. It also includes some training specifically for the health and safety coordinator as well. And telecommunications, that is primarily the work alone program that's covered under there. And then safety supplies covers things like your field level hazard assessment books and things like that, as well as earplugs, safety glasses, hard hats, things like that.
Can you expand a little bit, Director Vickers, on the Work Alone program, like what that entails?
Absolutely, Mayor Barkley. So this is a program that it's actually an app that can be downloaded on your phone. And anytime our staff is alone, they are supposed to use this program as a way to check up and make sure the safety of that employee. So they would put in their timeline of how long they're working and the address that they're working at. And this program will then periodically check up on them, depending on the nature of the work. If it's easy work, it might be every 2 hours that they check up. But if it's emergency or dangerous work, it could be every 15 minutes. And so this phone, then this app will like beep or something and make them go in and recheck back in. And if they've missed that, then it will actually go through a set of phone calls, first to them a few times, then it will actually go through to their supervisor, then potentially that director or a different director, and then potentially the CAO. And eventually, if no one answers, then they will, the program will call 911. So,
Okay, thank you.
yes. So. Okay, was there any questions about health and safety?
Do you want to just take a break before
Sure.
Manager Leith comes? 10 minutes?
Thank you, Mayor Barkley. So we'll start back at Fire Services. We do have Manager and Fire Protective Services, Gary Leith, here to answer any questions that you may have about his department. So in the fire tab, there's 2 sets of documents in here. So the first set is just for fire administration. So that primarily is Manager Leith, as well as a little bit of his staff in there. One of the big asks in this department this year is that he is asking for a full-time assistant fire chief. So this would be an increase to a full-time employee in here. I did print off the business case that was completed by Manager Leith, and I did give that to everyone this morning to go over. We'll just go through a few of this stuff, and then we'll turn it over to Manager Leith to go over his business case scenario, okay? So in the fire department, so again, they are asking for that full-time assistant chief. So they do have some radio replacements in this budget as well. What else is in here? We do receive Red Deer County contribution. It does go up each year, so this year we did put it up to $120,000. So this is for services for our fire department to go out into the county. So telecommunications that they pay for, they do have to pay for dispatch services, which is quite substantial. Their radios as well, and also any landlines and internets at the fire department as well. Their firefighting supplies is part of this department, so that's their bunker gear, anytime they need to buy hose replacements, helmets, boots, things like that. So they do have to pay for things like equipment repairs, they do flow testings, their SCBAs, compressor maintenance, that kind of stuff. They do have to get annual pump tests, radio replacements as well. Yeah, we did increase the transfer to reserve up from $75,000. We had initially wanted to up it to $100,000, but then lowered it down to just $80,000 as a way to cut some costs, but still giving it a little bit of an increase as well. So yeah, so the big increase on this department is that new position. So Gary, if you'd like to go ahead and talk about that.
I think we'll just refer to, if that suits, to the business case, if we work through that. In respect to the background, the lack of organisational depth within the fire department is leaving the department in an impacted business operation. Lack of coverage for the fire chief, protective services manager and director of emergency management. They're the additional roles that I fulfil currently. And other critical aspects of the department are being left to chance, and administrative and operational needs of the organisation are being under-supported for the department size. An assistant chief position would be indicated to alleviate these pressures and provide depth within the organisation to provide additional coverage and administrative support that a town this size or larger requires. Understand the budget pressures of the town and the fact that it would be prudent from an administrative perspective to add one position to Fire and Protective Services team. What that position would look like. So the addition of an assistant fire chief will create further depth of coverage for senior management roles of the department, which encompasses an on-call piece. Currently, the fire chief is supported by 2 paid on-call assistants and 1 deputy. So in respect of what paid on-call looks like, is those positions literally respond to calls and carry out some additional training through the week. So that's their role, because they have full-time positions in other occupations. This position will allow more focus for the fire chief and protective services managers to shift towards strategic initiatives related to municipal enforcement and emergency management. The position will alleviate the operational pressures of fleet and equipment maintenance, recruitment and retention, training plans and implementation, as well as emergency response. Currently, the department operates with the fire chief having 33 direct reports, dependent on current membership. There is a difficulty in managing that many people and ensuring legislative and operational requirements are maintained. Adding a full-time assistant chief will add capacity to provide managerial assistance to the chief and after-hour needs. The hiring of the position will advance our operational objectives of trying to instill an on-call system of senior officers interface with paid on-call officers. If we move down to service level impacts, the table there talks about the do-nothing scenario. The first column, high potentials for employee burnout and decline in performance, unable to meet the demands as they increase with higher call volumes, more complex needs of a paid on-call staff, and other town initiatives. Training objectives may not be met due to lack of program oversight and support for the paid on-call members. Risk of not complying with OH&S requirements due to an absence of administrative time and direct oversight. Continued risk associated with lack of senior officer availability after hours and during periods of unavailability of the chief. So the alternative, allow better work distribution and decrease stresses among staff, allow more accountability and oversight on operations and training, which are of major importance in staying compliant with OH&S and decrease litigation. Allow potential for enhanced after-hours consultation for paid on-call members. Allow for shift time to occur and fire chief to pursue strategic and operational needs. Direct training program oversight allows the burden to be removed from paid on-call members and can allow their focus to be moved to the delivery of training as opposed to administrative functions. Position allows for the close monitoring of changes within OH&S codes and how the fire service falls into it. Policy development, training standards and documentation, as well as maintenance programs, all create a less litigious position for the organisation. Enhanced operational oversight will, with maintenance, repair, asset management and planning. The recommended rationale is to incorporate the position of the Assistant Fire Chief to the full-time category of the town of Innisfail. The creation of the position will assist current and future operations by allowing more administrative depth to oversee the growth and operation of an expanding essential service. The cost-benefit analysis for this position shows by making an investment in the strategic positions will enhance and support continued model of the paid-on-call system. Reducing the burden of time and administrative expectations from membership base that is performing in an after-hours capacity will only benefit the town. This will be accomplished by supporting membership base by reducing administrative pressures and providing logistical support to maximise their after-hours training and operations. Now time for some questions.
Okay, thank you. Manager Leith, can you, we've heard from you before the increase in calls to your area when I guess ambulances may not be available. Can you run us through like just how that works, and do you have any idea what the split is, like the calls that maybe you shouldn't be the first responder to but are, like would it be 20-30% or?
Currently our EMS responses are around that 80 to year to date is around 80. Just to give some examples, not last weekend, the previous weekend, we received 4 calls, all of which were EMS calls. And they were in the Delta and Echo categories, so that is life-threatening categories where an ambulance is more than 15 minutes away. Or on request, so if it could be a lift assist as an example. So the crew that's responded there don't have additional supports to do a lift assist or manually move that patient out of the current location to the ambulance. The stresses on our system is, yes, that's a significant increase since I've been here. My 6 years here, we started doing around 30 calls a year. We're now going to probably hit over 90. So that's a significant impact on our current workload. As recent as yesterday, we attended a motor vehicle collision to the east of town, and at the same time an EMS call came in to one of our supported living accommodations. One of our trucks left that scene, came back to the fire hall, changed trucks because we had no medical pack on that particular truck, and were first on scene and had first patient contact for that Delta assigned call. So that paints a picture of the demands, to be fair. It is significantly increased on that EMS side of it. Hopefully does that answer the
Yeah,
question?
no, it does. It's just, it's so concerning, right? And I mean, I realize it's a whole systemic problem, but it's very concerning on when you're hearing those kind of things. And do you know how, like, the ambulance that should have been here, are they transporting to Red Deer, or do you even know? Like, do you know why they're not responding?
We're not privy to that
Yeah.
information.
Yeah, we aren't either, it seems. Okay.
Through to Manager Lee, just following up on Mayor Barkley's question there, who makes the call to dispatch your crew? Like, is it AHS, is it EMS, or if they can't respond, who makes the call? Who saying, we need your fire department?
So at the dispatch centre in Calgary, they have a GIS system with AVLS, so auto vehicle location, so they can see every ambulance in the province. When the call comes in to an EMS request, they will look at the nearest closest ambulance and it will calculate time to scene based upon that call designate, whether it's an Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta or Echo assigned call. If the ambulance is showing us more than 15 minutes out, they will automatically contact Red Deer Fire Dispatch, who will send us out to that call.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Heisted?
Yeah, how I'm looking at Innisfil, and I look at small communities or larger communities in the province is, and I think we are all well aware this is a systemic problem across the province. And how I look at the big picture is recruitment, retention, burnout, all those things in fire services. Like really, I was going to say you're drinking from the fire hose in your position, and I think I've seen in the last 20 years where the fire services has gone with the same crew for like 25, 30 years. And now we're seeing a huge shift on how do we recruit new firefighters, and as well as make sure that we're looking after you as a manager and the big picture. And we're not a mom and pop shop, and that's how I'm looking at this. I know it's a big, for us as a community, it's a big ask, but I look at services and the big picture, and some of those things aren't going to be solved by our provincial government. We need to, how I'm looking at it is leading as a municipal councillor and making sure that people are safe and doing the right thing. So I don't know if you need to add anything, but that's how I'm looking at it as a councillor. And this has probably been a long time coming, or this ask probably in the last three years, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, through to Manager Leith, just a question. I think we've heard before the potential need for more firefighters. I think this is the first time I've personally heard about the need for the assistant. Do you anticipate going forth that further need for firefighters? Because I'm looking at the projections for other years and not seeing it.
So the current model for a community our size, and it all depends on community growth. At some point, my recommendation would be to do a master plan in respect of fire and emergency services for the community. We have a number of significant changes potentially coming down from provincial government, which could impact our service levels and response. So at this point, it's a watch and play, and my recommendation moving forward would be to look at, in the short to medium term, at that master plan for emergency services.
But do you, let's assume the approval happens for the projected 2023, then, like I said, I'm not seeing significant increase beyond, which I would assume would be for additional firefighters.
Again, the model for most departments is based upon call volume. Our call volume in 6 years is nearly at double what it was previously. And there comes a sustainability point. If we hit 500 calls per year, we significantly would need to look at additional positions in a full-time basis. Note that certain incident responses generate funds as well. So motor vehicle collisions generate revenue for us. And that, again, is still seeing a steady rise in response types.
Okay, thank you.
Can you speak to some of those potential changes, Manager Leith, or would you rather not at this time? Coming down from the government you may see?
Certainly, obviously, the two main fronts in respect of policing and also EMS response. The initial outputs from the new Premier would suggest that the movement again to a provincial police service, and also that EMS response and control could be moved back down to local level as per the 2008 model. Not that I was here at 2008, so can't speak to that model and how effective or ineffective it was, but that certainly creates some angst to me on how that's going to impact our service levels.
So when you speak to that, like the 2008 model, what was that? Like you say, local control, is that local call center, or is that us owning like ambulances? And
Berkeley, the dispatch center for the regional zone was out of Rocky Mountain House at that time, with the more localized ambulance services. So yeah, it's controlled at a more of a local level. I think there is discussion due to the high call volume. There's been discussion, this trend is happening and there's no adjustments to the service. Do we need to buy our own ambulances to making sure we're covering these 80 to 120 calls per year, supported by a management system, internal, all the policies and pieces that need to be developed with that, anticipating community growth. So there's a lot of pieces coming out at the manager that I think that assistance would be appropriate from my perspective, just to help with it. Certainly plays into my world too, because the lack of a director oversight. So it kind of, my time in support of the department is certainly evident too.
so do you see a strategy development being a priority for like 2023-ish, or?
Certainly put it to the manager, but a plan needs to be developed. However, there's not a lot of room to work to develop the plan without the resources to do it.
Yeah.
So that's my perspective.
Fair enough. Councillor Heistad?
Yeah, Your Worship, thanks. That's what I was assuming with this position. It would be a lot more strategy for that individual, as well as the offset going to those calls regularly, and which would alleviate some of those pressures, not only on you, but the department itself. That's what I got from when you were speaking.
And the day-to-day routine maintenance of
Yeah.
equipment, the planning for training, the execution of that training, the documentation side of it, the performance reviews, there's so many things that sit below just operational response to support our individuals, mental health being another key piece, formalising debriefs, ensuring that we have people sufficiently trained in safety codes so when we respond to calls we can act appropriately in respect of investigations and who those people report to. My this week is spent doing Alberta Emergency Alert full day training, and yesterday sitting in on Justice and Solicitor General training in respect to peace officer programs. They're the consumer of my time at that strategic level, and making sure that I am aware of my responsibilities and community responsibilities, having somebody in between who can deal with those day-to-day demands. Certainly yesterday when we received 2 calls at the same time, and I'm in the middle of a training program, and we have nobody else left to respond, it falls to me.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to see, and I get it. I think, and I'm going to be right up front, I think it's needed. I think we need to make sure that the services are there. We've had the calls, and we get the data. The data's before us, and it's just us doing what's right. And sitting on protective services the last year, especially doing the policing committee side, for yourself to be fire and bylaw and policing, it's insane, and you have all those high-level meetings that you have to attend to. I just see this will alleviate a lot of the stress, not only for you and your department, but as well as it gives the part-time firefighters that opportunity to lean on somebody rather than going to you all the time. That's how I'm looking at it, and I'm fully in favor of this, even before we're at the end of the budget, so thanks.
Thanks, Mayor Barkley. I guess we've identified a problem and an opportunity here. What are if any, are there legal liabilities now that we've acknowledged that there's a potential problem down the road? And if something goes sideways on a call or something, are there legal liabilities back onto the town, Manager Letha? The reason I ask this, there's a whole cadre of lawyers out there that they're just loving this kind of stuff, right? If it can be proven that somebody's at fault, there's going to be lawsuits, right? And I guess what I'm asking is, does it put us in legal jeopardy if we?
I believe as the department manager, we execute our due diligence in respect of training and execution. That doesn't negate being on a public highway in icy, snowy conditions that somebody loses control of their vehicle and impacts one of our people.
I guess
that's a potential. And our officers make decisions in good faith. They have the certified training that allows them to make those decisions.
Yeah.
So in respect of risk to our organization, our current status, no, I don't believe we do. We act in good faith and we can demonstrate that. However, the documentation to support all those pieces continues to get more demanding for us to maintain those pieces.
And I guess that's where I'm headed with this. Like, I fully appreciate that when you respond to a call, guys are highly trained, they're doing their due diligence. But if we get to a point where we don't have, like your example yesterday, you were in a training course, there's 2 calls come in, like how do you juggle that? So if it can be shown that we don't have the staff in place to respond to that call. I fully understand once they get to the call, everything's fine. But it's the response to the call, and I guess that's where I'm headed. Manager Leith, yeah.
In respect to that, in medical first response calls, we can say no. You can turn around and say, we are not responding, and the ambulance who is more than 15 minutes out will continue to that individual. However, morally as a community, if we're able to turn around and make that response, we do. So let's be, if I can be clear on that, it's a voluntary service we provide for AHS. We buy into that because we have trained people in our community who can respond quicker at times than our current ambulance service.
Okay, thank you.
CEO Becker.
Yeah, thanks, Member Barkley. Manager Leith's point, he covered what I was going to say, but council can say, no, we're not responding to any EMS-related calls. Communities have stated that. A few years ago, municipalities were tested. Municipalities were speaking back. No, we are not going to respond. I know one municipality that's living that, but their fire department is pressured because their citizens are under need, right? And so you have a right to say, no, we're only going to respond to these calls. However, the council at that time said, no, we are going to respond appropriately to serve our citizens. And that's what we're doing. Currently, there's legislation to help protect, but anything that we do that is negligible, we're subject to lawsuit, even recreation or operations or anything. If we neglect, we have a chance of being sued.
So Manager Leith, when you get those calls, like if it wasn't a Delta or an Echo, would you even get them, like to respond to ambulance, or does the dispatch center decide, well, it's not, may need an ambulance, but it's not critical, so they can wait, and we won't try to contact Innisfail to respond?
And that's currently how it's set up, is we sign into Delta and Echo calls only.
Yeah.
Communities such as Penhold have a different designate. I believe they're Bravo up to Echo. So to ensure that we're attending only those critical calls, certainly if we signed into others, we would see I would expect significant rises in call volume for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you. Any further questions? No? No? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the next slide, to emergency management.
I'm staying.
This one will be quick, Manager Leith, and then we'll just have bylaw.
Okay, cool.
Quick thing. So. Okay, so emergency management, that's in the next tab in your book as well. So there has been no changes to this page from last year to this year. We do, under this department, we do pay to maintain the EOC center out of the fire department. In that room, there is 6 phones that are earmarked for our, in the event we need to activate our EOC, those phones are there directly for that use, as well as we do have computers and kits as well that have to be maintained and kept updated in that room as well. Manager Leith, did you have any comments you wanted to say on emergency management?
Just on the communication side, we have moved over to voice over internet for the phone system as well, and carry 2 satellite phones in the event of as a backup for total failure of communication systems.
Okay, perfect. Was there any questions on emergency management? Okay, then let's move up to bylaw. Okay. So in 2023, for bylaw enforcement, we do have the Community Safety Initiative in this department. So that was in the budget for this year. It has not been completed. So it is being carried over to next year. So in the sheets in your binder, you will see a transfer from reserve for $20,000, as well as the corresponding operating project for $20,000. So this year, the $20,000 that was funded to pay for it this year will get put into a reserve and then used to fund the project for next year. So that's to get that whole Community Safety Initiative plan done. Last year was the first year that bylaw received a summer student. It was quite successful, so it is going to be put in the budget for next year as well. The transfer to reserves is sitting at $20,000 as it is last year. Just a few things in talking with the CAO and SLT, the fine revenue has been increased to $75,000. Part and parcel is now we have 2 CPO1s, and the thought is that hopefully there'll be some more revenue on that. Yeah, and other than that, if you have any questions for Manager Leith about bylaw, or we can go through the lines to go through each item if you'd like as well while he's here.
I have a question about the fines revenue. Like, is that realistic? Because I don't think we're close to 50 this year, are we?
We will not be close to 50. We'll probably see about 35 this year in fine revenue. But Mayor Barkley, so I would like to say, so there's a difference between written tickets that our bylaw officers or our peace officers, have written versus what we've received. So this dollar amount that we recognize is only what we've received. So the peace officers may have written $75,000 worth of tickets this year, but we've only received a certain portion.
Okay, okay, because?
So for a number of reasons, Mayor Barkley. So one could be that they just don't get their ticket paid right away. Okay. Or nowadays, a common occurrence is a sentence fine, and that means that they don't necessarily pay the fine. They may go for the weekend. They may go away for the weekend, or
like on a holiday?
They might go away on a nice holiday for a day or two as a way to pay for their fine, or sometimes they're just being waived.
Okay. Sorry. Councillor Harrison?
Thanks, Barclay. And I have two questions. The first one is, what's the cost to fit a uniform on one of the peace officers?
So excluding his body armor, his vest, it's probably around $1,500 to $2,000 per
Okay.
year.
Okay, and the total cost of their uniform, like if you were to outfit one man?
If we were putting a vest on them, we can add another $1,200 to that.
Oh, okay, okay. And this has got nothing to do with the budget, but I often get asked, why do we have to lay a complaint to bylaw before an infraction is acted upon, such as snow removal on a sidewalk? Is there a reason why we have to complain before?
I think, to be fair to the two officers that we have one currently because one is on vacation. I think Stephen, 22 kilometres of sidewalks, maybe something in that region, is for them to be able to assess that as one officer straight away. We rely heavily on the community being the eyes and ears, and certainly we focus on hotspots after snow, such as around the hospital, the schools, etc. But yeah, it's a significant workload on top of also traffic, all animal control, all the other pieces that they do. So yeah, it's a significant workload. Certainly right now we have one because of vacation time. And we do rely heavily on the community for those eyes and ears, and they're thankful for that.
Yeah, because I get asked that all the time. They see the peace officer's vehicle driving by the same sidewalk every day for a month, and nothing's being done. So my response is, well, just phone the bylaw guys and make a complaint, and it'll be acted upon. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, well, thank you. Is he done now? Okay.
He can be
He
done,
can go?
yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks for coming, Manager Leith. We appreciate it, and thanks for all you do.
I know. All right, Mayor Barclay, we'd like to move into operations, the set of operations slides now. So the first one will be roads. I like this slide. I used it last year too, just because, you know, kind of raises them up a little bit. So I just want to do a little snapshot of what our operations guys deal with every year. So these are just approximate numbers. So 90 kilometers of roads and lanes, approximately 64 kilometers of each of water lines and wastewater lines, 36 kilometers of storm lines, 20 kilometers of trails, 58 kilometers of sidewalks, and over 200 acres of parks and green space. So it's a lot of work that they have to deal with. So. Okay, so for the first slide in operations is roads. So in roads, they do have 4 summer staff, which is the same that they had last year in this year's budget. The operating projects that they have put in this budget is $15,000 for an infrastructure study, and then $100,000 for both sidewalk repairs as well as sections of new sidewalks. So that's actually a city block that doesn't have a current sidewalk. So we're actually going to be putting in a new sidewalk in that area. It'll be on 48th Street is the new block of sidewalks. So, okay. So contracted services in this department is sitting at $65,000 this year. So $15,000 is for the center lines. $15,000 is for sidewalk and outdoor rink snow removal. $20,000 is for snow removal, the snow removal contract. Dust control is $10,000 and clean harbors is $5,000. So in this line, there was $20,000 for Main Street intersections to replace the it's the crosswalks in the intersections, yeah. So with that heavy-duty thermal paint or whatever it's called, go ahead.
Yeah, so what we were planning to do was, instead of doing all of the 50th Street, Main Street crosswalks, typically in the past, what's happened is we've let them, after 5 years, just deteriorate, and then we go in and we just do them all at once. We did that 2 years ago, and it was about a $97,000 hit. So the plan is to start adding operating projects in, so that we're doing 1 or 2 intersections a year, and at about the $20,000 mark. So we've taken that out of this year's in order to try and manage things, but it's definitely on those radar items of wish lists. Items. Just to clarify, I guess in regards to contracted services, sidewalk, mainly those, we do those in-house. Those are to help us if there's a major snow load that we just need help getting caught up. We would then contract that out. Same with the snow removal, that's for trucking. So additional trucking to help us get caught up. Those are items that just we carry every year.
So, Director Kennedy, what's going to happen as far as the new outdoor rink, and are you able to use Zamboni or the other ice resurfacer, the old one, or how is that going to be looked after this winter?
What we've done is we've adjusted our water sprayer on our unit. So we will try and use the old Zamboni, to test it out, see if it works. It's a bit of a trial there. That outdoor, yeah, we're changing our methods a little bit in order to try and better improve it, as well as doing the skate track and whatnot. So, yeah, a little bit of trial and error there, but also by changing our shifts as well to having weekends, that'll help us maintain those ice surfaces a lot better as well.
No, thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay.
There has been some decreases in this budget for, in the operating projects and infrastructure repairs. And because of those decreases, we actually did an increase to the transfer to the fleet reserve. So it went from $250,000 to $290,000. So on the second page of this cost center summary, you can see that it's up from 90, and then it does go back down to 250, but it may change in future years depending on the expenses throughout, right?
And just, I guess a little further on that one, and so the reason for that is mainly we're looking at our gravel supply and our stockpile supply. So if we can adjust, the intent is to obviously adjust, be more realistic, and then put that money though into our fleet reserve in order to plan ahead, because we do know we have an aging fleet. We need to increase that reserve significantly here in order to look into the future.
So I was at a CAPE meeting yesterday, and a supply chain professional was the keynote speaker, and he mentioned we should be aware of cement shortages and looking at a 55 to 200% increase over the next several months. So that may come into play with some of the things that we have on the go.
So through to the director, I'm accepting what you're saying, and I'm just suggesting in the future, if you need that more money in the fleet reserve, then that should be stated up front, because otherwise it looks like you just took a surplus and moved it there. And optically, it's better, in my opinion, to say that fleet reserve at 250 is insufficient. Has to be 290, otherwise it's easy to look at it and say, well, that seems like we could trim that back.
And then that's a fair comment. What we have to look at though is when our fleet reserve, not always, and what we've been working on the last 2 years with strategy is should we replace? Does it have to be replaced? Yes, we should plan ahead as best we can.
No, and I'm not questioning
Yeah,
that.
but that's why we fluctuated
number
a
at
little
all.
bit. Yeah.
Because I do believe over the last several years, we've come up with a better fleet. And I don't think we want to lose that level of fleet. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions about roads? Okay, let's move on to the parks. So in this department, parks, they do take all of our rentals and leases for our, like, grassy areas, our football and our soccer pitches. So that's where the revenue comes from here. They do have some operating projects. So they do have some tree planting for $15,000 and tree removals for $11,000. And also replacing the wood bullards for $10,000. So in this department, there is 9 summer staff. So last year, there was only 5 included in budget, so that is an increase to 4 summer staff. But there was some issues last year where they got quite behind and didn't have enough staff to kind of deal with all the maintenance through the summer. So contracted services under the Parks Department pays for the porta potty rentals that gets put around town. So the porta potties that get put at parks and things like that. So that this pays for that department, or this department pays for that service. So the transfer to reserve is $350,000 out of this department. And from that, $150,000 goes to the fleet reserve, or sorry, not the fleet reserve, the facility reserve, to help pay for new facilities. In this case, it will be going towards the pool aquatic center or whatever that may look like. And $200,000 goes to just the master recreation and culture reserve. So, and they do have some purchase of equipment. So small equipment like the wood chipper for $5,000 is included in this budget. And then small tools and trimmers and saws, et cetera, also come out of this department.
I guess to provide a little more detail on the operating projects. So in the tree planting, so that's usually our tree replacements, as well as identifying areas that we do need to do some enhanced tree planting. Tree removal is mainly the emergency area, the big trees that we just can't do in-house. That's a budget item for that. And then the wood bullards, that's focused mostly around Centennial Park, placing those wood bullards, but also around the arena, or the ball diamonds. There's a large number of those that are needing replaced as well. Then in regards to the porta potty rentals, once we do have the outdoor rinks set up this year, the intent is to install 2 porta potties at the new outdoor rink, as well as 2 at the Centennial Park this year within that structure that we have at Centennial Park, to try and encourage, obviously we're actively encouraging more involvement in those areas, so we're going to try and see how winter porta potties work in those areas this year.
Can I ask a question? Sorry. Can
Who?
I don't know if you can, I don't know.
Hi, Councillor Wing.
I don't know if you can see me on your screen, but.
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, perfect. I just have one quick question relative to the summer staff. Do we apply for any of the government funding programs relative to employing students?
Mayor Barclay through to Councillor Wing. So we used to receive a grant for about 5 summer staff from the federal government. They have since taken that grant away, and we're about 3 years now into where we don't have any grants for summer students. Apart from the skate park summer students, so we do get a portion of that back every year if we're successful. But no, we don't get any more grants for summer students.
So do we not qualify for the programs? Because I know some of the programs after COVID that like this last year were implemented, other organizations in town got them, but because we're a municipality, do we not qualify?
Yeah, so the program that we applied for ended, and there's no other programs that are eligible for municipalities.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
So my question would be, if anyone has any comments on the the big flower beds at the entrance to town, is this the corner of the budget that we should talk about them?
Yes.
So this would be maintaining them in their roughly the same state they were last year? Is that where we're at?
That's the new flower beds,
The big ones with the blocks
Yep.
on the corner?
so, yeah, so last year, we did just get them planted, so they didn't flower last year. So this will be, maintaining those now, so those are us to maintain.
So this will be the year that we'll see what they really look like.
Yep. So those plantings were based on our horticulturists' recommendations. So, yeah, we'll see how they plant this year and grow and flower. And then from there, we'll be able to
Okay,
go
thank you.
from any suggestions, I guess.
You can see the look. Yeah, I'm not the horticulturist. It would be nice to have a splash of color coming into town, right?
Yep.
And I know the year was horrible with rain to start with and everything, but,
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
They just didn't have, unfortunately, the plants that we got weren't in a flowering state, so.
yeah, yeah. The other question I have, Director Kennedy, with respect to, I guess, parks, like the, the picnic tables and benches down in the picnic area of Centennial Park are in pretty rough shape. Like, would that just be part of your normal maintenance schedule with your potentially summer students and? Yeah, okay.
I believe during COVID, actually, we took an opportunity during COVID to do a bunch of painting. We painted a lot of the benches along Main Street as well as the garbage cans, so, likely as, our benches and everything deteriorate, we'll be looking at that type of maintenance moving forward.
Well, and I don't know how it works, like liability and everything else, but there was a discussion the other day with the Community Partners in Action and potential men's shed participating in doing something like that.
Right.
That they may like to get involved, if that works with.
We did
with
reach
you.
out to them to mention about when they first brought in regards to the boulevard. We did a boulevard at Dodds Lake there. We did an upgrade there. We got a grant from Trans-Canada Trail to do an upgrade there. So we are always looking for partnerships to look at volunteerism.
Yeah, great. And Councillor Wing? Councillor Bates is watching you, so he's letting me know when your hand is up. Thank goodness, because I'm not paying attention like usual.
Yeah, well, now I'm gonna owe Counselor Bates, and that's a bit of a problem. I did bring this up in our pre-budget meeting on Monday, but, and I'm not trying to add anything, I'm not trying to add anything into this budget, but, that area around the new playground and the ball diamonds and the new outdoor rink, really needs more benches and tables for families. There are hundreds and hundreds of families that are down there between baseball and playgrounds and whatever. And so I just wonder if there's some place that we can talk later about opportunities for the community to be able to donate a table or donate a bench, that kind of thing. I think it's a huge gap. I've been down there myself, and it's fine to remember to take a lawn chair, but you can't have a sandwich, you can't take a picnic, that kind of thing. So if we can just keep in mind that there might be some opportunities for some of our local families to get involved and provide some of those nice to haves rather than need to haves, that might be an opportunity for us.
Good comments, and totally agree, Councillor Wing. And Director Vickers, like later discussions, I guess we'll have some discussions around priorities and things that maybe we might like to see that aren't in here already. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Once we get through this kind of whole slide deck,
yeah,
then we'll talk about the deficit,
Yeah.
what we can do about it, whether we
Sure.
raise taxes, franchise fees, cut services, cut whatever, right? Or raise revenue. Maybe we
Yeah.
can raise revenue too. So,
okay,
yeah, we'll talk about that at the end.
yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Through to Director Kennedy, there's other trails and other parks here that I've heard that they're uneven. Do you do regular inspections? And I refer to the park over by Dodds Lake Manor. It's utilized by a lot of the patrons there, where they have a little walking circuit, and it's uneven. There's cracks in it. So do you do site assessments every year, every couple of years, or?
We definitely don't do trail assessment every year. back in, I believe, in April, we came forward with planning to do an update to our trail master plan. In there was a trail assessment to be
Oh,
done, so we are
okay.
planning to do that this year.
This year?
Yep.
And then out of that
We will come
following
forward.
year, there would be budget dollars proposed for that? Because there's
Yep.
a piece of that trail that's is almost unsafe.
Yeah, it'll identify any of the, it'll be very similar to our road assessment, where it'll have
Okay.
severity rankings.
Yep.
And then from there, we'll be able to set some budgets.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks to Councillor Harrison for bringing that up. With some of the discussion that comes up at Age Friendly is the trails and how we assess those properly. I don't know if that's an opportunity to coordinate that with, FCSS and your department, but I just think that if we're doing an assessment, it may as well be full encompassing with some of the requests that Age Friendly has brought forward. Thanks.
So I guess, just to add, maybe if I can ask or if you could bring forward, I guess, what their, maybe just email.
Yeah,
or
what
provide
we
me
could
with
do
what their
through,
feedback
through the,
is. If there's specific things, then.
yeah, I think there's an opportunity to coordinate that, because that's been coming up for the last couple meetings, and I know that they're working on a fulsome plan for the upcoming year, so I can work with, that team. Thanks. Send it on.
Okay. Any more questions on parks? Okay. Let's move on to our public transportation department. So this primarily is the costs associated with helping maintain the Pace Bus and the van. So things are changing in this department for next year, primarily being the large bus will be being sent to auction and being sold off in some way, and we will be not continuing that service, as well as the Pace Bus. Both of them we are looking for a new contractor to manage that service for us. So we did have to change a couple of the items. So the rentals and leases, we did bump that up to $12,000, whereby a full year with a new contractor should be around that $15,000 mark. This year won't be a full year of realizing that revenue, so hopefully we'll be finding someone after the first quarter and then have 3 quarters of running this service. But then that also meant that the contribution that we would pay to run the Pace Bus that had gone to the Legion in the past at $88,000, we did have to up it to $96,000 for next year, with also the expectation that it's actually going to be in future years closer to that $115,000, $120,000 mark to manage that program.
And I can provide council a little bit more insight. As you guys know, we're kind of working through an analysis about, internal and external operation of it. So yeah, we're projecting at this point. And again, hours of service, all of those things we'll be discussing in the next couple months in terms of how we meet the need and what that cost works out to be, so.
Okay, thanks. My only concern, and I know you're early in this, but my only concern with contracting out the service is we now lose control. And it ends up like maybe taxi that's maybe not servicing the community the way we want it to. And so I just want us to be very wary of that we don't contract it out and then the contractor decides that they're not going to service the community the way it needs to be serviced or something, so.
Remember, once we know all those
Yeah,
details, we'll be bringing that for yourself and council to make decisions.
Yeah, no, for sure.
One other thing we did change is we did lower the transfer to reserve from 15,000, which this year would have been 10 going to the handy van or the Pace Bus reserve and 5 going into the bus reserve. We are eliminating that bus reserve, and that will get merged into the eventual fleet reserve. But so we did lower it just to 10,000 because both of our pace buses are fairly new, so. Yeah, well, I didn't want to bring it up.
Potentially, you're gonna have the bus revenue, so I don't know how that might
Yes.
go away.
Yeah, that's just in, yeah.
So one comment I have is, and it's not for this year's budget, but I think we need to watch and assess how they're run this year, now that we're branching out and trying to take the occasional patient to the distant locations. Because as we assess that, I'm still not sure we have the right vehicle to be taking a single person to Calgary or Edmonton. So we should assess that. That's the only point I want to make.
Absolutely. Okay, any questions on that? Okay. We can move on to storm sewer. So this is still a relatively new department. We did just recently implement a storm charge on the utility bills, a $3 for a single family or a single unit, or $6 for a commercial or a multi-unit family. So that's just a flat fee that goes on every month. So in this department, they do have some repairs and maintenance. So that covers digs and repairs, flushing of the lines or cammering of the lines, things like that. This year, we do have an operating project for catch basin repairs and replacements. So it is $50,000, and that is budgeted to do 10 different catch basins. In conjunction with the sidewalk replacement program, a number of catch basins have been identified for replacement before the sidewalk can be repaired. This program will also look at the upcoming capital road projects to complete any replacements in advance. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to expand a little bit on that operating project, so in the past, what we have been doing is kind of putting that into our sidewalk. So that cost typically has been eaten up by a lot of that sidewalk repair, that 50,000 that we have in our roads. So we're hoping this, by allocating this project in here, we can hopefully get more use out of our concrete repair, and which is, you know, a lot of our trip hazards, a lot of our heaves areas, the concrete that's just falling apart sidewalk. So we're hoping that'll help expand that program as well. So hopefully get benefit with both.
So Director Kennedy, going forward, I know we can't do anything with what's already in place, but going forward, like new areas, I don't know how to put this, but do you look at, I guess, ways to preserve kind of more natural drainage? And I know that Grand Prairie is actually putting forward an idea right now where they are looking at storm sewer charges, but it's going to be based on how much asphalt or concrete you have on your property. So, you know, if you're somebody like, say, a business and it's all concrete and you have no natural drainage areas or anything, you would actually pay more than maybe there wouldn't just be a flat rate of $3 or $6. You'd actually pay based on that difference between, say, the homeowner that 3/4 of their yard is grass. And so it's kind of an interesting concept. But I don't know, like, we look at new areas that potentially building out, like, do you take that into consideration when that community is being designed? Or are we still, or have things evolved, I guess, from 30 years ago when?
Right. It really comes down to the developer that comes and has in mind. I know there are developers out there that are way more, conscious of environment and put that in. My experience back, it adds a lot of cost. So it is, you know, if you can have a developer that's, you know, aggressive and wanting to do that, it's great. But it is a challenge for us even just to get most developers to do the minimum standards. So it is definitely a challenge.
I'm surprised it adds more. I would have thought it may be the other way because you're not using as much concrete and.
That adds space.
Okay.
So So which then takes away from developable area,
Okay,
which, yeah,
gotcha.
it all
Yep.
goes down to his bottom line, so, it is a challenge, but we, work with developers as
Sure.
we go.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions on that? If not, we'll move to water. Okay. So water. We have not yet received the Mountain View Regional Water budget, because I don't believe it gets officially passed until, I believe, the 14th of December. But we have been given a kind of an estimate that they guess, and that is an 11-cent increase. So I have done this budget so that the regional surface purchase from them is approximately 11 cents. And on that, then we also did a 15-cent increase for our rates. So we took the 11-cent increase that we received from Mountain View, and then we did a 4-cent increase for ourselves. So a 15-cent total increase for the rates. And we'll get into the rates a little bit more in reserves and all that kind of stuff. So we do have a couple of operating projects in this department as well. So the first one is a Reservoir 1 renovation for $50,000. So Reservoir 1 was taken offline in 2018 and has since been left empty. One of the sheds is being used for storage, and the other shed has been slowly decommissioned but still houses communication components. So the renovation to the reservoir will allow for storage of seasonal equipment like the mowers. So we also have a valve repair and replacement program. So in 2022, the utility department completed a valve assessment program to determine the number of valves that required repair or replacement. The program identified 64 valves out of the 1,756 that were checked that needed repair or replaced, and estimating 5 to 7 valves to be replaced or repaired each year. So contracted services out of this water line, so SCADA services, first calls, instrument tests all come out of here. Water and wastewater share a summer student, so 50% is on water, 50% is in wastewater. And water is one of those departments that we do net down to zero, so there is no tax-based funding is paying into the water department. So 100% of the revenue from the water comes from the water utility bills each year. So this department puts in $25,000 into the equipment reserve, and that could go towards purchasing their new camera that they bought last year, or new equipment, a new vehicle, things like that. And this year we're putting $77,000 into the water reserve to net this down to zero. So if you'd like to go to the next slide, Kara, and we can talk about like water reserve, water rates, where it's looking at, right? So this year is $286. That was with a 15-cent increase. If in further years we do 10-cent increases each year, then I have our transfer to reserve and our estimated capital projects. And you can see on the bottom, the reserve balance, how it's still slowly decreasing. And you can see when we go to our capital later around that $200,000 doesn't really cover a whole lot of stuff. Most of our equipment, or most of our projects for water are quite large, in the 4 to 7 to even up to $1 million for replacement. So right now our balance is sitting at $971,000 by the end of 2023. That would cover one road, basically, one road project.
Is that legend at the top correct? Is the 222 is 286, is that not correct?
Let me double check that, hold on.
You're talking about the cost from the commission?
So that's gonna be our rate that we charge out to our residents. That's not the commission's rate that we're paying.
I thought the 2022 2022 rate from the commission was 286.
No, because we charge, I think,
We pay quite a bit
270.
less.
Well, I'm
Because
just-
our retail rate is 270.
I know we charge more, I'm just saying, I kind of took notes at the last meeting of the unofficial numbers, and I thought,
So last year, sorry, Mayor Barkley through to Councillor Bates. So last year, the rate was $1.86, and this year now it's $1.97.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
just
that-
that, yeah,
yeah, I'm looking at the pennies there that,
yeah, correct.
yeah, sorry, thank you.
Director Kenny, can you give us an idea, and I know it's, would be different depending on what needs to be done, but kind of a block of replacement infrastructure, what would that cost? Ballparkish,
Just the ballpark.
just a ballpark. This is,
It's actually, we can be broken down, so if you take, for instance, one of our capital projects is 46th Avenue, so that's 2 blocks of road, which typically we would try and do 2 blocks in order to make it
Okay.
most effective. That's, I think, in the $800,000 range. So but that includes your roads, your sewer, your water, and your services. So if you break that up into 3 and say it's, $200,000 for water, $200,000 for sanitary, that probably, that's where we come up with the
Yep.
200,000, would work.
Okay.
So that's kind of how we come up with that number.
Okay.
And this would then make it so that it's now fundable within
Yep.
operating and not have to rely on MSI.
yeah, it's just good to know when people ask, right? Like
Yeah.
the water, you think it's expensive, but how much is a cubic meter of water? Well, it's, 220 gallons, and when you say like it's 900 or 800,000 to fix a couple of blocks,
Yep.
people don't realize that, just
Yep.
how expensive it is, so thanks.
Thanks. Just to expand a little bit on the operating projects as well. So Reservoir One it's definitely a project that we've been looking at for a while. The foreman from Terry has been wanting to utilize that reservoir for a number of years. It's classified as a building almost. This would provide us with an opportunity to actually utilize some of our infrastructure better, to have it just a sitting buildings, because we looked at, do we repurpose it or do we demolish it? And the cost to demolish that building was gonna be huge, so this was a really good, effective way to utilize some of that. And then the valve replacement, so this year, we had Tagish do up a unidirectional flow program, flushing program. In order for us to really achieve that program or start that program, we need valves that operate properly. So that was our purpose this past summer with a summer student was, as indicated there, we turned about 1,700 valves. We're able to find out which ones are needing to be replaced. So this summer, it's that starting the program to get those replaced so that we can actually start incorporating our flushing program for the future.
Okay, is there any other questions on water?
I'm gonna make one more comment. I assume we watch our billings from Mountain View and make sure they make sense to us. And the reason I bring it up is I'm aware that the commission has had other members, not frequently, but very occasionally, see a discrepancy and then bring it to the attention, and then the meters get calibrated, and there has been adjustments made because sometimes meters aren't working right, so.
Yeah, we've
It's something-
asked in the past for a reconciliation of the bill, just to make sure that it's,
But
that's
if we
still on
notice
par.
something strange,
Yeah.
we need to bring it up. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we can move on to wastewater for now. So the SRD Commission has given us their increase for next year, and that is a 13-cent increase for 2022. So then we actually implemented a 20-cent increase for ourselves. So we took the 13-cent increase from the SRD, and we gave ourselves a 7-cent increase for the department. Okay, so in this department, we do have some operating projects, and that is the manhole repair and replacements for $30,000. So there's a couple of reasons to focus on sanitary manhole replacements or repair. One is to increase the longevity of the infrastructure, and two is to reduce infiltration. So that is quite important. The selection is based on random inspections during main flushing. So the engineering services comes out of this department, $40,000. Again, they have the summer student shared with water. So they do pay for their portion of the SCADA first call and instrument tests under contracted services, but they also pay for the coverall rentals as well. That comes out of this department. The transfer to equipment reserve is $35,000. So water is $25,000, wastewater is $35,000. They're going into the same reserve. And then for wastewater this year, we actually have to pull from reserve to balance out this department. So the rate itself doesn't make enough to cover this department, so we do have to pull from reserve. And Kara, if you just want to go to the next, no, that's okay. So this is the water or wastewater rate versus reserve forecast. So if we do a standard 20-cent increase each year for the next 5 years, you can see the transfer to reserve for the first 3 years, we're actually pulling from reserve instead of transferring to reserve. And it's not until 26 and then 27 that we're putting money back into reserves. And with our estimated capital projects and the balance at the end of 27, we're going to be sitting with only $34,000 in reserves. So if you want to go to the next slide, it shows you what it would look like if we increase it to 40 cents. And you can see it's much drastically not depleted as much. However, it's not until 27 that we're actually putting more into reserves that we theoretically assume that we would take out. And then we'd start building the reserve up again. Yeah.
So for clarification in regards to the estimated capital project for this year, so that is the 46th app?
Yeah, hold on, let me just see.
Because we don't have enough MSI funding, I believe that's one of the projects that we're identifying, either that or it was
Yeah, a part of 2023 surface improvements, and then, yeah,
and I think it was 45th
oh,
Ave.
45th Ave, yeah.
45th Ave. That's why that number's so high there, is we do have 2 major capital projects this year identified for
And
replacement.
what did you say, 46 and 45?
So 45th Ave close,
Okay.
I believe was one. And then a portion of the surface improvements.
Yeah.
Because there's, one of the projects in the surface improvements has a block of road that has significant sags in it. So we need to remove those sags in the sewer. That's why this is
Yeah.
contributing to that project.
I guess the concern I would have is looking at 2024 on, what's to make us think that we'll be that much better? Like, those are not very big capital projects.
I guess, based on the forecast, so if you look at, in 2024, we put 200,000 for water. So then you have 200,000 for water, 200,000 for wastewater. So we started looking at adding these into, to try and distribute. So right now, this year's capital is all distributed into one. We didn't distribute it into water. So we're kind of trying to disperse that cost out, if that makes sense. It definitely is, like, we're gonna be still highly relying on MSI or LGFF, but we're trying to make it so that we can start absorbing these projects into these.
Okay. And then my other question was, these slides relate back to Erica's initial projection of, was it 350 utilities per month for 10 cubes?
Yes, so that is just with the 20-cent increase, not anything else. Every 10-cent increase on a 10 cube estimate would be $1 increase a month, so.
But these slides would equate that you had on water and wastewater increases
Yes,
would relate to that 350?
yes.
Thank you.
So I really just wanted to put that second one up there, just so everyone can see where it is, that if we continue go the way we're going, we will slowly just deplete out that reserve, and then we won't have anything to fall back on in the future.
Maybe, like later, if we could have a copy of those
Yep.
two, and we can just tuck them in our binder here for reference. and-
Absolutely. Well, I was gonna get this printed off at lunchtime
the
and
whole
hand
thing?
it out
Perfect.
for
Okay, thank you.
everyone. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna print off the whole.
Where do you wanna be?
Oh, one more, one more. Were we done with wastewater for now? Okay, perfect. So we'll move on to solid waste. Not much has changed this year. We did take out the cost for the recycling bins as we purchased them in 2021, so we don't need them anymore. However, this year, the transfer to reserve is a little bit lower, as we're not looking to increase any of the rates for garbage or recycling this year. And because the general cap reserves paid for the garbage bins in the past, not the recycle bins, but the first two sets of bins, there is a repayment plan from this department to pay back that, and it is supposed to be $34,000 a month. They're not gonna quite hit that for 2023. But so that transfer to reserve is going directly to general capital reserve and not into the garbage reserve. So, but there is no real changes to this department. We did do some adjustments to some salaries and make sure they moved around. But the cost to the services for garbage did not change this year.
So, Director Vickers, with the contracted service, how long does our current contract run?
I believe when we just signed it last year,
Yeah.
we did a 2-year
Is it two?
extension. So
Okay.
it should be in 23, is it 23 or 24? 24 that we'll be looking to go back out to tender potentially. so.
Would we might be concerned that, like, I don't see any increase in that going across to
No.
2027 and,
No, it's hard to extrapolate what it could be after 24 and going forward. Likely there would be some increasing.
just thinking fuel costs
Ex-
alone, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The fuel costs and carbon tax costs
Yeah.
as well. So, and as well as who knows what could come with extended producer liability as well.
Yes.
And whether, how that is going to look for future recycling, we don't know yet, so.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, is there any more questions on garbage?
I have one. Just in the last couple of 3 weeks, watching the conversion again to the lesser pickup of the.
For
of
the organics?
Of the organics. Of course, it's easy to look at your own position, but it sure seems to me like we could go less again. I don't see anybody putting their green bins out right now. Like, it's just an observation, and yeah.
I think we'll continue to do our quarterly surveys, so we'll have one or two probably done here, and then we'll be able to definitely provide you with some more data on that. I would agree, that's probably a good idea, but then we have to look at then, is there a reduction in fee as well, that if we're gonna reduce the service that much, but that'd be discussions, obviously, we would present back to you with some actuals, probably when we do our solid waste update. We'll provide you with some feedback there.
So when you survey, Steve, do you, like, do you just kind of drive around and see what green bins are out, or do you actually stop and open a lid? Because I'm sure, like, there are people that leave them out all the time.
No, she stops and looks at the bins,
Okay.
and we measure, so we wanna have an idea what's in the bins even.
Okay.
That's part of it, is
You should make a list.
Allison's, she loves doing this,
She
I'm
wears her
sure.
garbage police badge.
Yeah,
You should make a contents list.
so, yeah, we try and get as much data as we can when we go out there, but, yeah. it's an
Well,
interesting
maybe
one.
if we're actually gonna do a citizen survey on other things, we should have one little tiny section on garbage and just see what they say.
Yep.
Thank you.
I can. Okay. Okay, perfect. If we go to the next slide, I just added a utility bill comparison. Now, this also is in your binder under the water tab, just so we can see. There we go. So, and this is what it looks like. So this, we just did the update for utility rates for the other areas. However, we do not know if they're going to be increasing for this year or not. But even with our increasing, we're still considerably low than some of the other municipalities. And while note, I believe it was Penhold, this is their residential rate. They do have a much higher sewer flat rate for their non-residential properties, which would make that rate considerably higher. They were the only one that we noted that had different flat rates between residential and non-res.
Yeah, I think, so, Eric, when you have somebody like Sylvan Lake, I think they have a very high flat rate, like upwards of $55, $60.
Yes.
So when you calculate this, you're still adding on, yeah, it would all work out, because it's still 10 cubes and the flat rate, so, yeah.
Yeah, Mayor Barkley, so on the one that's in your binder, you actually have the full breakdown of each of the individualized rates for each, right? So we have water flat, water consumption, wastewater, and then garbage and storm as well. So you can see how the different rates for the different municipalities look like. Thing is, Sylvan Lake is quite low for their water rate, and they have an extremely high flat rate.
Yes.
So. So yeah, I just wanted to show kind of what our average utility bill would look like. No. No. Yeah, Sylvan Lake is not part of the regional line yet. If they ever did become part of that line, their rates would go considerably up, so.
So Penhold, do you know what the rate is on the
In Penhold?
non-res?
Penhold, it's $24.30 for any institutional, commercial, and multifamily. While their regular is what? $14.75 for their, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So, yeah. And then as well as in your little binder behind that, I also did the consumer monthly changes for 2023. I believe it might be in a further slide, but I can't remember. So if you look at the utility bill, they're seeing an increase of about $3.50. The tax increase up on a $322,000 house, just on average, is an increase of $7.46 a month, just for a total monthly increase of $10.96. That's where we're sitting at currently. This is in water. Yeah. Okay, we'll talk again about utilities later, but is there any other questions now? Okay, then we'll move on to FCSS. That's all part of garbage. So. Okay. So FCSS, we will be receiving our grant again from the government in the amount of $207,000, and that's the brunt of what we use to do out all the FCSS. Are you okay?
Is that confirmed?
We're submitting the application right now.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay,
They
thanks.
just submit it by the end of the month.
yeah.
Yeah, with the flat.
So this department didn't necessarily change. However, it did see the implementation of a manager instead of just a coordinator, and that manager's has other duties as well. So it's the manager's wages is only partially in here and is partially in somewhere else. So in effect, we did see an increase to salaries in this department, but then have just taken a portion of that person's salaries and moved it to the recreation side of her duties, right? And basically the only other difference is that we lowered the grants to others from 134 down to 120,000 and turned around and increased the internal programs down from 22,600 up to 33,600. Just so that we can do more internal programming ourselves rather than just putting the money out.
And the primary intent with that shift is to go towards the YPAC and the youth action programs.
Okay. Is there any questions on FCSS? And in the FCSS, there is still the age-friendly initiatives as well in here. It is down to 2,500, but it is still identified in this budget. Okay, we can move on to the cemetery. Excuse me. So we do have the transfer to reserve. We do have it identified as $7,500. However, that amount is equal to whatever the perpetual care brings in. So perpetual care is something that is charged when someone buys a new plot that is either going towards future maintenance of the cemetery or a future cemetery or something like that. So it's just going to go, it's an in and out on our budget. So as soon as it comes in, it will get transferred into reserves at the end of the year. Like for example, in 2022, we're already sitting at over $13,000 in that perpetual care. So that will get transferred to reserves at the end of the year. And they do pay for one summer staff out of this budget for essentially for parks. The operating project last year is taken out. That was, we did more cement concrete runners. So that's out this year and will be brought back into next year's budget to do more. Yeah, other than that, is there any questions on?
Yeah, I just have one question around the entrance to the cemetery.
Sure.
I know that's been approved in previous budgets. I don't see it anywhere in here. Is that coming up in the next year?
We never approved the budget. We did the plan. We had a plan focusing on some stages of what we could do for improvements in the cemetery. So we had some entrance, some parking improvements identified in the plan, as well as starting to do a bunch of infill development in the plan. So we haven't brought forward a capital plan for doing improvements.
And I don't see it in this year's budget either, so it'll be subsequent years. Okay, thank you.
Director Vickers, the Red Deer County contribution, is that an agreement that we have with them? And
Yes, Mayor
Is that-
Barclay, so it's actually coming up new. Yeah, it's part of the
Oh, it's in the
recreation
rec,
agreement.
okay,
Yeah, so
okay.
that's identified as a
Yeah.
line item in that, so that's why that's there. Yeah.
And then, do non-residents pay more for
Yes,
lots?
they do.
They do.
So Mayor Barclay, so anyone who lives in Red Deer County or an Innisfil resident gets certain rates, and anyone
Okay.
who is considered outside of those bounds do pay a higher rate than that. Yeah.
I got a question.
So when we get something like the vandalism, where do we cover that? When the dust settles and we figure out how much we have to,
So that would just be covered out of the repairs and maintenance for this department. And if we go over budget, then we would likely have to come back to council to ask for a budget adjustment and to ask where we're gonna fund it from. To be honest, I don't know what the costs were. I don't,
on the current one?
yeah, think it was-
Mainly labor.
yeah, mainly labor for our staff, but.
So we might be notified in the future that we have this adjustment to make, because $1,500, is that what I saw? Repairs
Yeah,
and-
$1,500 is the repairs and
Yeah,
maintenance.
okay, thank you.
Councillor Hystad?
Yeah, thanks. I guess it'd be to Director Kennedy and Vickers. Cemetery, we had some issues with the cemetery, and then we're looking at the dog park and doing some work up there potentially. Are we looking at any cameras in those areas, similar to the down in the Centennial Park? Just seeing that the issues had, this comes up every,
Right.
5 to 10 years.
We haven't identified any type of review, I guess, for cameras up in the cemetery area. We did, we increased in Centennial Park.
Yeah.
We increased 2 cameras there, but no, we haven't looked any further for additional cameras.
Okay, no, I'm just thinking potentially if we're gonna increase traffic in that area, so, thanks.
Okay, is there any more questions about cemetery? Okay, if. No, that's, yeah, we're gonna move on, yeah. So we're gonna move on to the municipal planning department. So this department primarily does our plumbing and gas inspections, our building inspections, our safety code levies. Yeah, all of our development permits, that's funded out of here. So contracted services, so we pay for MuniSite, so that's our online mapping system of all of our linear assets. That's available to staff as well as also to the public, as well as our Alta List subscription is paid out of there. Planning services is paid for by this. This is primarily our contract with PCPS. We did lower that this year down to $30,000. So our contract is $20,000 minimum that we pay. And then we have an additional $10,000 for just additional planning support in the budget as well. Our facade and our infill program is run out of this program. So facade is at $10,000. So that primarily would cover 2 business renovations through their application process, as well as the infill program is funded out of this department, and that covers $60,000. Yeah, so primarily this covers our electrical, plumbing, and gas permit that we do receive a portion of the revenue from Superior. It's a 60-40 split for all of the costs and expenses that come from doing plumbing, gas, and electrical permits. Building permits is a new thing that we've done primarily last year with the expansion of that department. And then we're going to continue that this year as well. Yeah, so the safety code fees is just an in and out on our budget, so we do have to charge it on permits, but then we remit it directly back to the province as well, so it's just a clean in and out. Yeah. Off-site levies is also on here as well, so that is identified as a $25,000 revenue with also a corresponding $25,000 transfer to reserve. So similar to cemetery and perpetual care, this will be an in and out. So I believe right now this year it's quite low, only maybe $2,500. So that's what that transfer to reserve will be. On the offside, it could be $100,000, and then we would transfer to reserve for that as well. Okay, is there any questions on planning?
I'm just trying to find the facades. Have we had any this year?
I believe we had one earlier this year, the old medical clinic building beside the Fox and Hound. They went through an application process. They've got some new signs and a new parapet wall sort of on the front.
Okay, no, I'm just wondering.
And the facade and infill are on the grants to others line on that summary. So it does say $70,000, so
Yep,
$10,000 is for infill and $60,000, sorry, $10,000 is for facade and $60,000
Okay,
is for
yeah,
infill.
that's what I was trying to find that. And
Yeah.
no, the only thing I would say about facade is, and I think we've seen some of this at AMA or Municipalities Association, or some of the documentation we've seen over the years that, you know, when you have buildings that have maybe not the facade, but the labeling in the windows and stuff like that makes it more aesthetically pleasing. I was thinking of our downtown core where it struggled. The appearance is kind of not the best, but I think there's an opportunities how we can communicate or maybe assist those landowners that are either buildings don't look up to standards, but when people come into the community, they don't see a dead building, they see a community that wants to invigorate and have commerce come to our downtown core. And I think that that's always been a struggle, and maybe there's an opportunity to work with those owners to make them look more pleasing. That's just my thought on the facade piece. We've had it for a number of years. I think it's probably 12, 15 years, but just looking at it differently than just updating your building. Yeah. If that makes sense to council. It's pretty minor. That's like counting paper clips, Gavin. Sorry.
is there any more? Okay, if there's no more questions, we'll move on to land sales. So this looks a little bit different. We have drastically increased our land sales with the thought that we will be selling off a lot of our industrial land next year. So that you do see that as $2 million in land sale revenue. Land development is what it's called.
Should be the next one in here.
Oh, is it? Well, that's Patty's fault, so.
I'm gonna reuse though.
Yeah. I don't know. Okay. Okay, so we did drastically increase the revenue up to $2 million, primarily for our industrial land that is for sale right now. But with that then is a corresponding transfer to reserve is drastically increased this year as well for $1,665,000. But besides that, you can also see that we're now going to be paying some payments for the loan for the industrial area subdivision. Well, we haven't signed off on that yet, so we don't know the exact amount. But in the binder, I did print off for a $5.5 million loan for 10 years, doing interest only, would be approximately $262 and some change $1,000 a year. So I did indicate that payment in there as a payment. We'll only be paying mortgage interest until the end of the loan. And all this money that's going to be going into reserves from the sale of these lands will be offset to pay for these mortgage payments and then also pay for the brunt of it at the end of the 10-year term.
Okay, and we can pay that off anytime,
Yes.
correct?
Mayor Barkley, we can. We only have to pay a penalty of 3 months interest at any time, and then we can pay it off whenever we want.
So question, like, is it possible to get a line of credit instead of an actual mortgage where it can be paid off with no interest?
It can be. The interest rate may not be as low as it would be through this program, but that is something that I can definitely look
Yeah,
into
could you?
and bring back to.
So does the government have that as well, like a line of credit, or they just do?
No, they only do the loans to,
Yep.
to local authorities. So if we wanted a line of credit, we'd likely have to go to
The
a
bank.
bank,
Yep.
right? And then we'd have to see, I don't even know if we could have it unsecured, or would it have to be secured, and what we could secure it with?
Well, we
Could that
can
even be?
secure it with the land, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I can look into that and make some calls and
Yeah.
do some checking and
If
see
you
and
don't
bring
mind.
something back to council for,
And that rate, is that the most current rate?
that's, yeah, I did that
Okay.
just like yesterday or the
Okay.
day before, just so that's what the current updated rate is, yeah.
Okay. So question, and this goes back into another section, so our reserves, I know you're working on reserves policy and all
Yes.
that kind of stuff. So when I see, I don't know, let's say $14 million in reserves, is it possible, or are you looking into being able to take maybe, we know that we're not going to use 5 or 6 of that for 10 years. Can we look at taking an amount of reserve and investing it in something other than savings account? Because that would go to pay for this, right?
Absolutely. So we have developed a draft
Okay.
investment policy
Okay.
that I've just been busy with budget.
Yeah.
So that will be coming
I like
shortly for your guys' review.
Okay.
With the intent that starting in very shortly, either in January or early February, we would start investing some money after we've done a cash flow reconciliation to make sure we have enough cash in the bank, right?
Yep. So do you know, Director Vickers, off like just kind of a ballpark, like, are you able to take a good portion of the reserves and invest that, or is that restricted in any way?
No, so
okay.
even if they're restricted reserves,
Yeah.
we can still invest that money.
Okay.
The only thing is restricted reserve, something like the offsite levy reserve, that's a restricted reserve that we just can't move and spend how we see fit. We can still invest that money, but that interest income that would be made on that portion should go back into that reserve. And that will be all outlined in the reserves policy,
Okay.
which reserves are restricted, which aren't, which are interest bearing,
Okay.
which aren't as well.
And then would you look at, but I don't know if you put an RFQ out or whatever you do to have people come and do a presentation where we're looking at outside of maybe what a normal bank product might be and, you know, getting into the bond market and,
Correct. Yes, exactly, Mayor Barkley. We would do an RFQ or
Yeah.
something like that to send it out, and then everyone would submit their rates, how long, things like that, right? And minimum amount, because certain areas, maybe not necessarily a bank, but other companies do have minimum amounts that you can invest in, where it could be a $250,000 minimum or something like that.
yeah, I'm just thinking if we're looking at, I don't know, I'll throw a number out there, but I have no idea, like $6-7 million, if you're getting 4% on that, it's significant, right? And-
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. We have seen a very large uptake of even just regular
Yeah.
interest. So
Yeah.
through COVID, interest rates were quite down. We were seeing about $9,000 or $10,000 a month.
Yeah.
The last 6 months, we've been seeing over $40,000 a
Yeah,
month in
I've
interest.
seen that,
So
saw that in your.
it's
your doc.
considerably, and we did drastically increase it for next year as well, just to offset not only the increase in just monthly,
Yeah.
but also investment.
And just maybe,
opportunities.
not that you ever try to want to guess what's going to go on, but it might be just a, you know, a great time to, you know, do something different when rates are where they are and,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah. So that will come either, maybe not in December or
Okay.
early January. I'll be
Yeah,
bringing that to
no,
you.
for sure.
for your
Thanks for all
review.
your work on that. Counselor Bates.
So my question is specific to this.
Sure.
Could you repeat what you said, the reserve that you've projected, say, for 2023? Could you repeat
So-
what it's for and where it goes?
Absolutely. So so this is a department that we do net down to zero, that the tax base doesn't pay for, similar to our utility departments. So any revenue comes in, we have to net this department out and transfer all remaining revenues to reserves. So we are seeing a $2 million increase, that's what we're estimating in land sales next year. So that's going to make a corresponding $1,665,000 transfer to reserve to net this down to zero. That's after we're already taking into account the $264,000 mortgage interest line that we added in there. So
So
now that will go into the land acquisition and development reserve that we will use in future years to pay for these mortgage interest payments if we don't make any land sales in, say, 2024 for that land, then we'll have to pull from that reserve to make this payment. And then this, that will also pay for the whole, like all the money from that land is going in there. So we'll be pulling that money to pay for the loan at the end of the 10 years.
So I guess the discussion we had when we took the loan out, and I mean, the reserves are this lump of money that can be invested and everything else. Is it possible to designate that, at least so it's labeled, that little piece of that reserve that does account for the principal
Yeah.
to this? Because again, it was back to my principles of, my personal principles of not supporting the fact that we weren't paying any principal off, so we aren't. I mean, that ship has sailed. Can we not designate, though, some of the reserve that is the appropriate portion of the principal, so it's actually, it's got a label on it, and at the end of our council term, we've at least labeled 3 years of principal,
Yep, I
so
can
that, so that
definitely,
2 more councillor terms, somebody says, well, that's cool, we gotta pay a whole principal off.
yeah.
And I just want it labeled, that's where my brain is. As long as I'm a councillor,
Absolutely.
I'd like to say that we have it accounted for.
What I can do is on,
And I realize somebody can move all that later, but then they have to make that decision.
that's right. What I can do on the reserve sheet, I can just make a secondary line under the land reserve to identify what's regular land reserve for you guys can choose to do with what you want, and then what portion is for the repayment of this loan that's coming from the sale of that lot,
That
those
would
lands.
satisfy my
Okay.
itch, thank you. No paper clips.
Okay, yeah. Contracted services just in this department did decrease. That pays for things like the legal cost, realtor costs if there is any next year, any land titles fees that we have, that comes out of there as well. So. Okay. Any more questions on that, or we can move on to the campground? Minor changes here, but this is, we're talking about the Anthony Henday Campground located at the northwest corner of town, where 56th Street intersects Lakewood Drive. It is operated by the Lions Club each year. As in 2022, our land rental income from the Lions is $17,000. That was unchanged from last year to this year. And the repairs and maintenance and transfer to reserve didn't change. We did change a little bit of the natural gas and electricity charges had to be increased. But other than that, there was no changes made to this.
Question, Director Vickers, when you, like you locked in utility rates for the municipality, can you do that for the campground too, or is that separate?
So this is under our rates.
This is,
So we,
okay.
they don't have a utility bill, we just pay the utility bill.
Okay, so they're locked in.
They are locked in, yes. Or, well, the electricity rates will get locked in I believe January is when they get locked in or something, so, yeah.
Out of curiosity, what is that electricity rate that you think we're gonna get locked into? Just-
I'm not sure at the top of my head. I don't believe we haven't received their breakdown, like they put it out to tender and we haven't received any of that information yet, so.
Well, I'd be curious to know.
As soon as we find out from them, we'll be bringing something to council, a report.
Thank you.
Yes, exactly, yes. Okay, was that it for campground?
That's it. How about,
How about that's it, that's it? We'll take a break?
we're done? Yeah, I think-
Yeah,
is that okay?
that's good.